Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I never imagined grief could taste like betrayal, but that's exactly how it felt. Standing at my mother's graveside, while knowing my father was hundreds of miles away with his mistress. People whispered that he might be too heartbroken to attend, but I knew better. My mother had been the quiet protector of our family, holding together a house built on secrets, and now she was gone, and he didn't even bother to show up. That night, after everyone left and the house fell into that strange silence death brings, I sat alone in her room. Her cardigan still hung over the chair. Her perfume lingered in the air. I held her phone, even though it had been disconnected days ago, and then it buzzed. A message appeared from her number. "I'm not dead, come to the cemetery, now." I felt the blood drain from my face. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Logic screamed it was a cruel prank, maybe from my father's mistress. She'd always resented my mother, even years before her death. But a darker part of me, the wounded daughter still hoping for a miracle, needed to know, so I grabbed my keys and drove. The night swallowed the road like a secret. I could barely see through the fog that clung to the trees. As I drove, I thought of Mom, the way she hummed while cooking, the way she smoothed my hair when I cried, the way she covered for Dad when he stayed out late at the office. She always told me, "One day you'll understand why I stayed." I used to think that meant love. Now I wasn't sure. The cemetery gates were open. I parked and stepped onto the dewy ground, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. The air was so still it felt staged. I followed the path to her grave, each step heavier than the last. When I reached her headstone, I saw someone, crouched beside it, a woman, my father's mistress. She stood up slowly, her face pale as chalk in the moonlight, and she was holding my mother's phone. Before I could speak, she said in a trembling voice, "You needed to come. You deserve to know the truth." My hands curled into fists. "You texted me? From her phone? On the night of her funeral?" "She wanted you to know what he did," she whispered. "We weren't just having an affair. He told me she died in her sleep." "But she didn't," her voice cracked. "He'd been poisoning her for months. I found out too late. I thought if I went with him, I could collect proof." My stomach flipped, nausea rising. Rage tangled with disbelief. She stepped aside, revealing a metal lockbox half buried behind the headstone. Inside were medical reports, voice recordings, and bank transfers, all pointing to my father's plan to start a new life with her and erase the past. My mother had known, and she'd tried to gather the evidence before she died. The mistress, no. The accomplice turned witness looked at me with eyes full of guilt. "I'm done protecting him, but I can't do this alone." In that moment, something inside me shifted. Grief made room for strength. Fear made room for fury. I wasn't just a daughter mourning a mother. I was the woman my mother raised, quiet when needed, relentless when it mattered. 2 weeks later, the police arrested my father mid-flight attempt. The world saw a scandal. I saw justice rising from the grave, and here's what I learned. Silence doesn't protect the innocent. Secrets don't stay buried. Grief can break you, or it can break the cycle. If you're carrying pain someone else caused, don't wait for permission to speak. Be the voice your younger self prayed for. Be the storm that ends the lie. And above all, when the past calls you in the dead of night, don't run, drive to it, and finish what someone started with love. I used to think funerals were supposed to bring people together, even broken families like ours. But as I stood next to my mother's casket, fingers clenched around the folded obituary, all I felt was abandonment layered on top of grief. Everyone kept glancing at the doors, expecting my father to walk in, head bowed in sorrow, maybe carrying the guilt of a man who'd just lost the woman who built his life. Instead, the pew where he should have sat stayed empty, cold and loud in its own way. My aunt whispered excuses to anyone who asked. "He's overwhelmed," she said. "Too heartbroken to even stand." But I knew the truth before anyone spoke it aloud. He was boarding a plane that morning with the same woman who'd stolen his attention long before my mother took her last breath. The same woman my mother pretended not to see. The same woman whose perfume I'd once smelled on his shirt when I hugged him goodnight. People offered condolences with rehearsed sympathy, telling me how strong I was, how proud my mother would be. I nodded, because that's what daughters do when the world is watching. But inside, I was choking on the memory of my mother's final weeks, how her voice weakened, how she stopped arguing with my father altogether, how the hope in her eyes thinned like mist. And still, she never spoke one harsh word about him, as if protecting me from his betrayal mattered more than protecting herself from it. When the casket was lowered, I stared at the freshly turned soil and imagined her hands, the ones that used to tuck my hair behind my ears, now lying still and alone beneath it. No husband holding my shoulder, no father wiping his eyes. He was probably sipping champagne at 30,000 feet, telling his mistress the timing was unfortunate, but necessary. I didn't cry in front of anyone. Not when they placed roses over the lid. Not when the pastor said her name with a practiced hush. Not when I helped my little cousin pick up the petals she dropped. I held my tears like a secret vow, one my father would never hear, but one I intended to keep. It wasn't just that he didn't care enough to show up. It was that he never even pretended to. That kind of betrayal doesn't hit you like thunder. It settles into your skin quietly, like frost, until you stop recognizing the difference between numb and broken. And the worst part was how normal everyone tried to make it seem. How no one wanted to speak the truth, that the man who should have been mourning was with the woman who helped him forget his vows. Mourning didn't skip him. He chose to skip it. That choice lit a fire in me I didn't know existed. I just didn't realize yet how far the flames would spread. The house felt heavier than the cemetery ever did. Grief has a way of clinging to furniture, to walls that remember laughter, to clothes still hanging in closets that will never open the same way again. After everyone left and the front door shut behind the last sympathetic smile, I finally let myself breathe without an audience. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was accusing. I walked into my mother's bedroom like I was trespassing. Her cardigan was still draped over the chair beside the window, the one where she used to sit and pretend to read while really just staring outside. The indent from her head still lingered on the pillow, and her scent hovered in the air like it hadn't realized she was gone. I sat on the edge of her bed and picked up her phone from the nightstand, even though I knew it was disconnected days earlier when my aunt handled the paperwork. I don't know why I held it. Maybe I just wanted one more piece of her in my hands. My thumb traced the cracks in the screen she never bothered to fix. For a second, I imagined her walking in and scolding me gently for sitting on the quilt she kept spotless. I imagined her voice, tired but warm, asking if I'd eaten, if I was sleeping, if I was okay. None of those things were true, and the worst part was she wasn't here to pretend with me. Then the phone buzzed. I froze so hard it hurt. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it, that grief had finally blurred the line between real and impossible. But then the screen lit up in my palm, and a message popped up from her contact, the one still saved as Mom. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the words as they crawled into my bloodstream like ice. I'm not dead. Come to the cemetery. Now. My first instinct was to drop the phone, but my fingers wouldn't open. My heart thrashed in my chest like it was trying to climb out. Every logical thought scattered. The number was hers. The message was real, and the timing was too deliberate to ignore. A dozen explanations crashed through my head. Glitch, hack, twisted prank, stolen phone, but they couldn't drown out the smallest, most dangerous thought hiding beneath them all. What if? Not hope exactly, but something close enough to hurt just as much. A part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room and lock every door. Another part, the one that had spent months watching my mother fade while my father disappeared into someone else's arms, refused to stay seated. The message didn't offer comfort. It wasn't gentle. It was a command. And if someone wanted to play with the dead, then I needed to see the face of the living person behind it. Whatever waited there, truth, cruelty, or madness, I knew staying home would be worse. So I grabbed my keys, wiped my face with the back of my hand, and answered the message in the only way I could. I got in the car and drove. The road to the cemetery felt longer than it ever had, even though I'd driven it dozens of times before. Streetlights flickered in that unreliable way that makes everything look haunted, and the fog pressed itself against the windshield like it was trying to climb inside. I gripped the steering wheel harder than necessary, my knuckles pale in the dim glow of the dashboard. Every mile I drove, another memory surfaced, uninvited and unforgiving. I remembered being 9, sitting in the back seat while my parents argued quietly in the front, my mom staring out the window while my dad pretended to focus on the road. I remembered her excuses for his absences, that he was busy, that he was tired, that people in love don't always look like they do in movies. Even then, some part of me understood she was protecting me from a truth she hadn't figured out how to face herself. The message replayed in my head like it was stitched into my thoughts. I'm not dead. Come to the cemetery. Now. It wasn't the wording that terrified me. It was how absolutely sure it sounded. Whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted me there, alone, at night. And I still went. My headlights cut through the darkness, but everything outside them felt unreal, like I was driving through a dream someone else was directing. Grief already distorts time and sound, but that night it twisted my sense of reality too. I kept checking the phone on the passenger seat, half expecting another message, half dreading it vibrating against the leather. A part of me prayed it was my father playing some grotesque game, because at least then I'd know the rules. Another part, a part I'm ashamed to admit existed, wondered if somehow the impossible had happened, if the burial had been a mistake, if my mother was out there waiting with some terrible, beautiful explanation. I thought about calling someone, my aunt, my best friend, even the police, but what would I say? That the dead were texting me? That my father's mistress might be staging ghost messages from beyond the grave? Nothing about it would make sense to anyone but me, and even I was hanging on by splinters. As I turned down the narrow road leading to the cemetery, the world seemed to quiet itself on purpose. No cars, no wind. Just the hum of my engine and the dull thud of my heartbeat in my ears. The iron gates were open, which sent a fresh shiver through me. They were usually locked after sunset. I didn't know if that made things better or worse. I parked crookedly near the entrance and killed the engine. The silence that followed was so complete it felt staged. I could see the faint outline of headstones in the distance, rows of shadows tucked into the earth. The fog hovered low, curling around the graves like it had been waiting. I sat there for a moment with my hand on the door handle, trying to convince myself to move. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked pale and older, like grief had aged me faster than time could. I took a breath I didn't feel and stepped out of the car, each footfall muffled by wet grass and dread. I didn't know what I was going to find, just that turning back was no longer an option. The further I walked into the cemetery, the more the night seemed to close in around me. The air was damp, heavy and still, like the world was holding its breath. My footsteps made almost no sound against the grass, and every shadow looked like it was watching. I followed the path by memory more than sight, guided by the faint outline of my mother's headstone in the distance. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. Then I saw her. At first it was just a shape crouched low beside the grave, dark against the pale stone. My heart lurched so violently I thought I might faint. I stopped walking, frozen in place, the kind of fear that empties your lungs, locking me still. The figure shifted, and a few strands of hair caught the moonlight. Light brown, straight, familiar. It was her. My father's mistress. She rose slowly when she realized I was there, like she'd been waiting. Not hiding, not startled, just waiting. Her face looked wrong in the moonlight, streaked with tears or sweat or guilt, I couldn't tell. And in her hand, catching the weak light, was my mother's phone. For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat was so tight it hurt. 1,000 questions tangled together, none of them making it out. Rage came first, bright and sharp. You texted me? My voice came out low, scraped, dangerous. From her phone? On tonight of all nights? She didn't flinch, but something in her eyes flickered. She looked haunted. Not smug, not cruel, haunted. She held the phone like it was something that burned. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but steady enough to make my skin prickle. You needed to come, she said. There are things you don't know, things she tried to tell you. I almost laughed, but the sound died in my chest. You think you get to talk about her? After everything you— She knew, she interrupted, and the way she said it stopped me. She knew about him. She knew what he was doing. The world tilted for a second, and I struggled to hold on to the pieces of reality I had left. She wasn't talking about affairs anymore. There was something darker in her voice. Regret, fear, and something like desperation. She stepped back from the headstone and moved aside. That's when I saw the metal lockbox half hidden behind the stone, pushed into the dirt like someone had tried to conceal it but didn't finish the job. My breath caught and my pulse hammered in my ears. I stared at it, then at her, trying to read the truth in her face. She looked nothing like the victorious other woman I'd imagined all these years. She looked like someone standing on the edge of a confession she couldn't undo. "She was trying to protect you," she said quietly, even when she realized what he'd done to her. I felt my knees weaken, but I fought to stay standing. The sickness rising inside me wasn't just fear, it was recognition. My mother's sudden decline. The way she stopped arguing. The way she seemed to know something she never said. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe anything that came from the mouth of the woman who helped tear our family apart. But the lockbox was real. The phone was real. And so was the terror simmering in her eyes. That's when I finally understood. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a message from the grave. It was a summons to the truth. I stared at the lockbox, the metal glinting dully beneath the dirt, as if it had been waiting for me longer than either of us could admit. My breath came in shallow pulls, and for a moment, I couldn't move. The woman, watched me with an expression I couldn't read. Guilt, maybe. Fear. Something brittle and exhausted. I crouched down and pulled the box out of the ground. It was heavier than I expected, the kind of weight that doesn't belong to metal alone. My fingers were trembling as I brushed off the soil. I didn't ask for a key. I didn't ask how she'd found it. I didn't ask if my father knew she'd brought me here. Some answers were already taking shape without words. She finally spoke, barely above a whisper. She didn't die the way they said. He made sure she couldn't fight back. But she knew, and she collected proof. I found pieces of it because he trusted me more than he should have. I felt something dark and electric rise inside me, not just anger, but a kind of clarity I'd never felt before. Memories flash-cut through my mind. My mother's sudden fatigue, the dullness in her eyes, the way she never finished a sentence about the future anymore. And my father, always gone, always late, always smelling faintly of guilt masked with cologne. My hands tightened around the box. "Why tell me now?" She let out a shaky breath that sounded more like a confession than an exhale. "Because he thinks it's over. Because he doesn't know what she left behind. Because I can't carry it alone anymore." I stood up slowly, the box pressed against my stomach like armor. The fog curled around our legs, and the silence between us felt as charged as a fault line. I looked at my mother's name engraved in stone, the date etched beneath it like a lie carved into granite. Everything in me ached to scream, to crumble, to ask my mother why she stayed, why she didn't run, why she didn't tell me sooner. But all that came out was a quiet, steady breath as my pulse steadied with something new. Purpose. The woman wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "There are recordings, bank transfers, medical reports. It's all in there. Enough to destroy him. Enough to prove she wasn't crazy or weak. She was trying to stop him. She just didn't have time. The night didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive with every lie my father had ever told. Every time my mother smiled through something she should have screamed about. Every moment I thought she was fading because of heartbreak instead of something far more intentional. I didn't thank the woman. And I didn't forgive her. But I didn't walk away from her either. Not yet. I held the lockbox tighter and looked at the stone one more time, the earth freshly turned, the flowers still bright and wrong in the dark. Something in me settled, not softly, not peacefully, but with the weight of a door locking into place. Whatever came next, I knew one thing. This didn't end in the ground where she was buried. It started there. In the weeks that followed, I didn't sleep so much as endure the hours between night and morning. I opened the lockbox alone at my mother's kitchen table, with shaking hands and the kind of silence that listens back. What I found inside wasn't speculation or suspicion, it was evidence sharpened to a blade. Medical reports showing toxins misdiagnosed as age-related decline. Financial transfers hidden in shell accounts my father thought no one would trace. And audio recordings, her voice, soft and tired, documenting everything she couldn't bring herself to tell me out loud. I brought it to the police. Not with tears, not with theatrics, just a folder, a statement, and a spine I didn't realize she'd already built inside me. And when they called him in, he didn't look surprised. Just annoyed that someone had outplayed him. The arrest made headlines. The kind of scandal that forces people to pick a side between the story they believed and the truth buried underneath it. Some relatives called me brave. Others called me disloyal. None of that mattered. What mattered was that my mother's name would not be reduced to a death certificate written around a lie. The woman who once stood beside him now stood behind me, not absolved, not redeemed, but no longer hiding. She gave her testimony without makeup, without excuses, without pretending she was innocent of everything except silence. I hated her and, in some small fractured way, pitied her too. But I didn't need to sort that out to do what had to be done. The day the verdict came, I visited the cemetery alone. No fog this time, no messages. Just sunlight warming the stone and a quiet that didn't feel cruel anymore. I traced her name with my fingertips and slipped a folded piece of paper into the grass at the base of her headstone. It wasn't a letter, just 6 words you didn't leave unheard. I know. I stood there until the breeze picked up and the world felt like it was finally exhaling. Closure isn't something that appears when justice is served. It's something you build, piece by jagged piece, from the wreckage someone else left behind. My father is gone from my life now, stripped of the image he hid behind. His mistress, his former accomplice, went her own way after the trial, and I didn't follow. She gave me the truth, and that was all she would ever get from me in return. Grief didn't leave. It changed shape. It became something I could carry without drowning in it. Something I could use. I don't believe in ghosts. Not the kind that walk in the dark, anyway. But I do believe the dead find ways to finish what they started, through the living they refuse to give up on. She didn't climb out of the ground that night. She reached out from it, and I answered.